Oli here, and this is my review of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, the fourth and final story of the 25th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Sylvester McCoy as the 7th Doctor. The Greatest Show in the Galaxy is the 155th story overall. It's 4 parts long and is written by Stephen Wyatt. So the plot of this story is as follows. Although Ace hates clowns, the Doctor decides to take his companion to the psychic circus on the planet Segonax. There they find a group of scared performers who live in fear of the sinister and creepy Chief Clown. But what is so dangerous about this particular circus? Why is there such a small audience, and will Ace be able to overcome her fear before it's too late? And that is the plot of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. And what do I think of this story? It's one of my favourite McCoy stories, and this story also proves that this Doctor Who still had a lot of potential in the late 1980s, and it did have a very strong vision heading into the 90s, but as we all know, the BBC was still adamant that Doctor Who needed a rest. The production was quite good. This is another location shoot, and most of Stegonax was just another BBC quarry, and the circus was filmed inside a tent/canopy as opposed to being in the studio, because I think it was in the bestest issue in the studio, so they had to switch to filming in the canopy tent sort of thing. And I actually liked it because it gave the story a bit of atmosphere, and it helped the story look a bit creepy as well. Although we do get to see the Doctor and Ace inside the TARDIS, and this will be the last time we see this version of the TARDIS in the classic. So in the next time we see the TARDIS interior, the Doctor's TARDIS interior is in the following story, but then they actually destroyed this set, so they had to have like a makeshift set and make it and dim the light. Right. The circus itself looks very much like a circus, and as I said before, I like how ordinary real world elements are being introduced into Doctor Who. The costuming was brilliant. I liked how run down they were, especially the circus performers. It indicates things that weren't actually going very well, and the things needed to be stopped. The script was great, and it was very clever as well, and the direction by Alan Raring was just as good. And I think the plot was quite good as well. And this is essentially the first Doctor Who story to be set in a circus setting, and it was full of psychotic robot clowns, and that what makes this Greatest Show really stand out compared to the others. And it took 25 years to Doctor Who to do a circus story, but better late than never. And what also makes this story very unique was how meta and self-referential the story was, and this is probably the most meta Doctor Who has been and probably ever will be. And there are a lot of allegories that associate this story with other behind the camera elements of the show. As like the Psychic Circus is a blatant example of Doctor Who itself, because it was said that the Psychic Circus was bringing in a lot of people during its heyday, but then things were going quite badly, and obviously it wasn't as good as it was anymore. And obviously still he had people like Morgana and the Ringmaster, and Morgana was still quite reluctant to do so, but she still stayed there. But then it was very crystal clear that the circus had definitely seen better days, and that was the general consensus of Doctor Who around the time this story aired. Even though I do think that the Sylvester McCoy era is actually good enough, is actually just as good as it was in its golden era, which was probably the early mid 70s. But that's just me. I do. But I think what also makes the story quite interesting was the character of Wizkid. He was the young super fan of the Psychic Circus, and he outright says that the circus wasn't as good as it was during its heyday, and that was an obvious. So Wizkid was an obvious representation of those Whovians proclaiming that 80s Who was, when it was still airing, wasn't as good as other eras of the show, despite being not old enough to remember those stories. But although Wizkid does make a valid point, because the Psychic Circus was not good. In addition, I think the store lady who was operating near the circus, so it was probably represented those people who hadn't really watched Doctor Who, but they don't know much of it, but then they just know that just crap just goes on in there and just disregarded it as well as nonsense. There was also a message that criticized the movement of the hippie movement outside this time period, and when it was popular, which was the 1960s, and according to Stephen Moffat, and the characters such as Bellboy, Flower Child, and Kingpin, they were obviously hippies, and I think Morgana and Ringmaster were hippies as well in some way, but then They were all, except for the ringmaster and Morgana, they're trying to free themselves from the circus because, but the three I mentioned, especially Bellboy and Flower Child, they couldn't get with the times, so to speak, and there was no point in staying. Morgana definitely felt this way when she was telling the ringmaster, that everyone used to be free, but now they're all a part of the machine and they couldn't really do anything about it. But well, obviously this was probably because of the gods of Ragnarok. But the ringmaster said that the others were lazy and not wanting to adapt, and they were all wanting to live in the past. And I think this can be applied to the John Nathan Turner era, especially when Eric Sayward was still the script editor, especially during that time when Michael Grade was trying to get rid of Doctor Who. And then it's now only trying to adapt with the times, especially, and it's a bit of a clear struggle when it's quite evident with the ringmaster who with his very bad rapping. It was intentional, but it did have its charm, and Ace calling the Doctor an aging hippie. And lastly, the gods of Ragnarok were obviously representing the BBC higher ups, with the circus performers trying their damned hardest to impress them and ended up getting destroyed if they didn't. And the human form was obviously a mother, a father, and a little girl, who were obviously acting as the general British population, as the small family, like the BBC were trying to aim their programs at. Right, and then obviously their true forms, they look like scary statuesque creatures who are obviously the BBC higher ups. And obviously you do have the final act with the Doctor trying his damned hardest to impress the gods of Ragnarok in I think it was the Dark Circus. He's trying to entertain them with magic tricks, but then they're not interested one bit and they're trying to destroy the Doctor. I.e., the BBC really wanted to get rid of Doctor Who despite them doing their damned hardest to trying to impress the BBC audience. And the example of the caves was the Caves of Androzani, even though that is one of the most critically acclaimed Doctor Who stories of all time. But then what happened the year after that story aired? A Doctor ended up getting cancelled and put on hiatus. The Doctor does succeed in stopping the gods of Ragnarok, but unfortunately it wasn't reflected like that in real life. As we all know, Doctor Who ended up getting cancelled in 1989. But the ending of the story does make things better, with Kingpin and Mags promising to bring back the circus, in hopes to make everything better. And Doctor Who does return in 2005, which was a huge success and is still going on to this day, and definitely made things a lot better, at least until up to after, at least probably after the 50th anniversary, or even before the 50th anniversary. But when they go across that bridge, when they get to it. And the Greatest Show in the Galaxy had a lot of very awesome moments, especially into part one, when a giant robot which revealed that Bellboy made emerges from the sand to attack the Doctor and co. But the Ace was able to disable it, but I think she whacked it over the head of a shovel nearby. And then there was another scene where the Doctor got cornered by the robot ticket inspector that was inside the bus, but then the Doctor decided to destroy it by confusing it with saying some very convoluted things, which ended up getting blown up. The Ringmaster's rap introducing the circus was quite cheesy, but then because of how horrifyingly bad his bars were, but it gave it some appeal. And the part one cliffhanger was actually quite creepy if you look at it. And this was when the circus Bellboy was captured and he was getting tortured, and Max was horrified by this and she screams, but she literally gets muted by the Ringmaster. And outside the circus, the Doctor and Ace are about to enter. Ace hears the screaming, but then the Doctor doesn't hear the screaming, but then she alerts the Doctor about it, but then the Doctor obviously can't hear it, and Ace is still very creeped out about this. Yes, and the Doctor is still asking her if she's going to go or not, and Ace is just has this very discontent look on her face. And the part 3 cliffhanger was just as memorable, as it had the reveal of Mags being a werewolf, and it was a ruse by the captain. And I did like the funky music playing at the end, which carried on to the start of part 4 when she was trying to attack and kill the Doctor with the Moonlight effects, which was an incredible scene full of incredible stunts, which I think Sylvester McCoy did mostly by himself. There were some other good moments, such as well, like Nord and WizKid's deaths, Bellboy sacrificing himself, of which disturbed and pleased the chief clown in the process, Kingpin recovering his memory and being able to help the Doctor and Ace, and of course the captain becoming a zombie thanks to the gods of Ragnarok. And I thought there were really good scenes as well. But one moment that really stands out was when the Doctor entered the Dark Circus to confront the gods of Ragnarok, and he was able to do some comedic tricks as well as some other magic tricks to try and entertain them. So in order to store the so in order to store them, so Ace, Mags, and Kingpin can find the second half of the amulet and hand it over to the Doctor, which he used to destroy the gods of Ragnarok and then defeats them in the most badass way possible by reflecting their laser beams or something at them, which ended up destroying them. And the Doctor walks out of the psychic circus with a big explosion He's just slow walking, and I think Sylvester McCoy actually got caught got caught in the blast, and I think his clothes got set on fire. But he didn't really flinch, but he flinched a bit, but it was a small flinch. I think this is probably one of the most memorable moments from that story also. So on to the acting, and I think Sylvester McCoy was amazing. I have to say that this is one of his best performances as the Seventh Doctor, and the Doctor's manipulative side is put to rest for a bit, and I really like how his comedic skills were utilized for the story and the plot as well. He actually did learn some new tricks to aid the story also, and I do believe this was when he was suspended and he was trying to free himself. The Seventh Doctor obviously loved playing with the spoons and juggling. He does try to practice a few times so he can meet the gods of Ragnarok. And his best moment, probably my favorite from the McCoy era, was when he confronted the gods of Ragnarok, who are the family seated at the back of the circus, and he was doing a lot of tricks to try and impress them. He even does trying to do a bit of David Blaine with the suspension in midair, trying to free himself. But when he finally got the amulet, this is where the fun begins, and he does the most damage and becomes a total badass and destroys them with the powers reflected against the amulet, which ended up destroying them. It's as if the Doctor was in his element, knowing what he knew to stop them. And I think the symbol of the amulet had like an eye at the back, which was seen at the kite that Flower Child had made. And also, I do like how he had some very funny one-liners, especially when he knocked out the clown with a bowling pin and he says join the club. It was very James Bond-esque. And so when the day is he does the badass walk until when the circuit exploded, and when he actually walks away without a flinch, even though you can see he flinches just a little bit, but it was actually quite impressive. As I said before, McCoy's coat actually caught on fire whilst they were filming that scene, and he didn't really notice. Sophie Aldred was great as well, and this is the first story in which Ace's character starts having an in-depth exploration, as she dislikes circuses and clowns, but she isn't quite scared of them, but she doesn't actually say that she's scared of them, but she says she does find them very creepy, hence the tension an Ace has with the chief clown, who already has an interest in her because she was wearing Flower Child's earring as a pin on her jacket. She does do a bit of heavy lifting herself when helping characters like Mags and Kingpin to try and help finding the amulet, but Ace doesn't do a whole lot with it because she does have Mags and Kingpin helping her in part 4 also, which is okay because you don't really have to rely on the companion doing the carrying all by themselves. And Ace does get another special friend this week, and this was Mags. And I do like how Ace immediately knew that the captain was treating her like shit, but she doesn't actually find out, or at least on screen, that Mags was actually a werewolf. On to the sidecast, and they're all really good. So first off, we have Bellboy. He was a former worker at the Psychic Circus, and he was responsible for maintaining the robot clowns. He and Flowerchild attempted to escape, but Flowerchild got killed. He was later captured and held captive in his old office, and he was later found by Ace. He realized he couldn't escape again, so he had his own robot clowns kill him. Then we had Flowerchild. She was a performer at the circus, and she made the kites that were seen at the entrance of the circus, which had the eye symbol, eye insignia, which was on the amulet as well. Which was used to track her down. She gave Bellboy her earring, which Ace later found, but she was killed by the robot button conductor. Then we have Max. She was the captain's companion, and the two were heading to the circus. They were meant to have performed in the circus, but the captain was tricking others such as Nord and Wizkid into performing before him. But when the Doctor returned, he was able to convince them to perform with him, but it was revealed by the captain that Mags was actually a werewolf from the planet Volpana, and there was a good dose of foreshadowing hinting at her true identity, such as her reacting a bit weird when she saw moon signs on the temple that was at the back of the circus. Yes, and Max was afraid of her werewolf side and feared it could return and cause harm. She mauled the captain to death after the doctor was able to convince her to control her true nature, and she does help in stopping the gods of Ragnarok and decided to stay with Kingpin to run the circus. I thought she was a great character, and she does actually become a companion of the Seventh Doctors in Big Finish. And we have Morgana. She was a fortune teller of the circus, and she sold tickets at the entrance, and she had the gimmick of a traveler, or at least a traveler, like a Russian traveler or something. But then she was obviously putting it on, and she actually does have a normal English accent. She tried to prevent the Doctor and Ace from letting them in the circus, but then the chief clown actually let them in anyways. She didn't really like the idea of people coming in to perform for the gods of Ragnarok, and was well aware of the things that were going on, and she didn't really like them. But the ringmaster kept reassuring her that things were all right, and but she does pretty much allow Wizkid go and perform because he probably did the circus anyways. And then her and the ringmaster were forced to become a part of the clown's act to entertain the gods, and they were shoved into a basket and they vanished when they opened, and we didn't ever see them again. And then we have the ringmaster. He was the host of the psychic circus, and he pretty much accepted the fact that people were going to get killed in the ring, and so he could stay alive. And it didn't really phase him, but Morgana had clearly had issues with it. He disappeared with Morgana when the clowns shoved him and Morgana into the basket as well. Then we have Nord. He was a biker slash strongman who was particularly nasty to others and refused to take the Doctor and Ace to the circus. He was able to entertain the gods by showing his strength, but he failed to tell a joke and he ended up getting killed. But then I suspect that Nord may be a bit of a over-exaggerated parody of the Sixth Doctor because, as you all know, the Sixth Doctor is very blunt and can be quite rude at times. For no particular reason, had a very bad dress sense, and he actually does try to strangle the captain unceremoniously for no reason at all. Which obviously the Sixth Doctor strangled Perry at the start of his era. And then obviously he gets unceremoniously killed when he fails to entertain the gods of Ragnarok. Kind of like how Colin Baker was unceremoniously fired because his era failed in the eyes of the BBC. Then we have WizKid. He was a galactic fanboy who travelled across the galaxy to audition for the circus, but he was tricked into performing by Cook because he was a fan of the captain and he couldn't entertain the gods, and he ended up getting killed as well. It was a very obvious representation of the Whovians who are very nitpicky about 80s Who, but I guess his quick death was a middle finger from Jonathan Turner and Nigel Cotmore to those fans also. And we also have Kingpin. He was one of the main founders of the Psychic Circus, although he was able to recover his sanity. But before that, he was referred to as deadbeat, and when he was first seen, it seemed as if he had lost his mind and was considered to be stupid. Yeah, but this is him actually getting into the Dark Circus and meeting the gods of Ragnarok. Although this was implied, he doesn't explicitly mention, but it's implied that he actually saw them and they pretty much made him insane so they can keep him in check. He had one half of the amulet of the eye, but the other half was actually hidden inside the bust, which Ace had actually found. After the two pieces were put together, he recovers and becomes a big help in stopping the gods of Ragnarok. And after the day is saved, he and Max decide to stay to revive the circus and make sure things go back to its glory days. And I think he was a great character. I think he's definitely one of my favorite characters as well. And I like the scene when he was able to recover the amulet. No, he was able to. I think the amulet was recovered, and he was able to regain his sanity, and he was able to stop Ace and Mags in destroying the robots. When I say robot, I meant the big robot at the start of at the start of the story. And we have the villains. First off, we have the chief clown. He was the head of the clowns at the Psychic Circus, and he was in charge of security, as it seems. He seemed to be ready to become servants to the gods of Ragnarok and lured people into the ring where they ended up getting killed. He also went on the sacrifice of Seganax in the hearse dressed as an undertaker, hunting those that escaped so he doesn't lose his control. And he met his end when he was killed by the robot that attacked the Doctor and Ace earlier, and he and the clowns went to look for Ace, Kingpin, and Mags. After his death, Kingpin lamented and said that he used to be a good clown. I thought he was a very good villain, although he was very minor, but he was quite creepy as well. Then we have Captain Cook. He was a renowned intergalactic explorer with the gimmick of an old English explorer. He had Mags as his companion, and the two met the Doctor and Ace, and they were on their way to the Psychic Circus. The reason why he went to the circus was to claim a mighty power of a sort. He reasoned his way out to performing by tricking Nord and took advantage of Wizkid's admiration for him and had them go in his place when they died. And when they died, he showed no remorse whatsoever. And his reasoning was survival of the fittest, which does become a bit of a recurring theme in the following season, anyways. But he and Mags ended up as a part of the Doctor's act in trying to entertain the gods of Ragnarok, but he pretty much revealed that Mags was aware of and had Mags try to kill the Doctor. No, but he ended up getting mauled to death, but then the gods actually decided to revive him as a zombie. But he fell into the world whilst he was going after the Ace and Mags, and that's how he died. He was another good villain. It was clear as day that the Captain was not to be trusted, because at the start when the Doctor was attacked by the robot, he pretty much just sat back and decided to sip on his tea. And when he and the Doctor went inside the bus and the robot bus conductor was about to attack them, he pretty much literally shoved the Doctor under the bus, also to speak. But oddly, and it was strongly hinted that he actually mistreated Mags as well. But oddly enough, he took offense to the Doctor calling him a bore. Well, and the Captain can also be seen as an evil version of the Doctor, not necessarily another version of the Valiant, but a very polar opposite of the Doctor. Who was because Cook was not much of a hero, and he used his wits to get out of dangerous situations and watched others do the heavy lifting, leaving the Doctor to deal with the robot, the bus conductor, as I mentioned before. In addition to mistreating his companion Mags and used her as a weapon and using her werewolf side as a weapon, something that she did not like and struggled with. And I do think this is a bit of foreshadowing of the Doctor and Ace's relationship, also with the Doctor going to manipulate Ace in some stories in the following season, and it was clear as day that he knew what was going on also. And lastly, we have the gods of Ragnarok. Now, this is an obvious reference to Norse mythology, and in the human form in the ring, there were a family consisting of a father, a mother, and a little girl who would hold numbered cards to show how much they liked the performance, and they resembled stone statues in their own realm called the Dark Circus, when they made living beings suffer so they can be entertained, and if they weren't entertained, they'll kill the person who was trying to entertain them. They took control of the psychic circus so they can find entertainment, and the Doctor entered the Dark Circus and performed a series of tricks to try and entertain them, but they were not impressed. When the Doctor still soldiered on, he was able to gain the amulet, and he used it to destroy them because the amulet had their symbol on it, which was reflected against their own powers, and that's how they ended up getting destroyed. Right, and they're linked to the normal universe as well. And despite appearing in the final act, I think they were great overarching villains, and I think that's how they should be. And I like how the gods of Ragnarok were represented by two groups of people because they also have the same purpose. As I mentioned before, the human forms was obviously a family representing the ordinary TV viewers who want to be entertained, who quickly used rest also. And I did like how the mother said to her husband, and they hope that the last act, with Wizkid, was better than the last act, which was Nord, which does strengthen this claim. And what really sticks a knife in is what I said about Nord being a bit similar to the Sixth Doctor. Yeah, there was a bit of a sour reference, but funny if you think about it. Right? But then, of course, the real selves was just as scary and imposing, just like the BBC higher ups, who wanted to be entertained without giving a damn of what was actually going on. But the Doctor had no choice but to destroy them. And I also say that the BBC higher-ups were an extension of the human family in the circus, thinking that they're acting on their behalf, but then in reality they're just thinking about what's best for them, in my own opinion. And in terms of fault, I don't think there were any, but I could say that having WizKid and how he was basically a parody of how annoying Whovians could be, and especially if they were able to put two and two together and realize that the circus was a representation of Doctor Who in its state in the late 80s. They might have been justified in their reviews, but WizKid gets zapped, so that doesn't really matter anyways. So to conclude, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy is a brilliant story featuring creepy clowns, scary godlike monsters, complete with one of the most meta references one can ever find in Doctor Who, and dissecting this story and what it's about and the hidden meaning is just as fun to do as well. Oh, and it's just as fun as watching The Greatest Show in the Galaxy as well. which is great, scary fun, and I give the story a perfect 10 out of 10. Yay! So that is it for season 25. Join me as I rank this season. And thanks for watching this review. Please let me know what you thought of the greatest show in the galaxy and this review itself. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Until then, I shall see you later.